My family took it upon themselves to fix every aspect of my life without so much as asking. From forcing me into a career I hated to micromanaging my relationships and cutting me off financially. And when I finally tried to push back, their rescue mission exploded into a catastrophic disaster that left us all in ruins. I'm Ryan, 27, and for most of my life, I've aimed to show my family I could manage independently. They mean well, I've always told myself, but their kind of love always felt stiflingly controlling. Every choice, big or small, was met with doubt, unasked for advice, and sometimes outright meddling. My past hasn't been without its rough patches, with job losses, a failed business, and a relationship that ended leaving me questioning everything. But I never gave up. Now, after years of struggle, I'm finally in a good place. I have a steady, well-paying job, an apartment I'm proud of, and for the first time in ages, a truly happy relationship. Of course, my family sees things differently. To them, I'm still the kid who makes poor decisions, the one who needs guidance, correction, and occasional saving from himself. They don't say it directly, but their actions are clear. Every piece of good news is met with forced enthusiasm and a thinly veiled, "Are you certain this is right for you?" I should have sensed something was off when my mom called me 3 times in one day, insisting I come for dinner. I told her I was busy, but she wouldn't let up. Then my older brother texted, suggesting I be home at a decent time. That was strange. No one ever just showed up unannounced at my place, but his message hinted at a planned visit. When I got home that evening, I found my entire family in my living room. My parents, my 2 older brothers, and my younger sister. They weren't just visiting, they were waiting. The air was thick with that uneasy silence that makes your stomach clench. My mom broke the quiet, her voice carefully measured, as if about to deliver bad news. She began by saying they were worried about me, that they discussed it and decided it was time to intervene before I ruined my life any further. Still standing by the door, completely blindsided, my dad slid a folder across the table. Inside were job details, an offer from a company I'd never heard of, arranged through a family connection. I barely had time to react before my brother interjected, saying they'd already spoken to my landlord and arranged to cancel my lease. My mom, smiling as if she'd done me a huge favor, told me not to worry because they'd already put a deposit down on a house closer to them. "You'll be so much better off there," she added, as if my input was irrelevant. I looked at them, trying to process what was happening. It didn't stop there. My mom went on to explain she'd set up a date for me with someone she considered a better fit, someone with a more stable background. At first, I thought I'd misheard, but no, she meant it. She'd gone behind my back and tried to arrange a relationship like we were in another century. Then came the final blow. They admitted they'd been monitoring my expenses. My dad, arms crossed, stated they'd been tracking my financial habits and had even made some adjustments to my budget to help me manage my money better. I didn't even know what that meant, but it didn't matter. I'd heard enough. My girlfriend, who arrived a little later, walked in just as they were discussing the better-suited match. She froze, listening for a moment before stepping forward, her face unreadable. "Did you know about this?" she asked me, her voice sharp. I barely got a word out before my mom answered for me, insisting they were only trying to do what was best. That's when my girlfriend turned to me, waiting for my response. I could feel my anger rising, but I knew if I let it out now, it would only confirm their belief that I was irrational, impulsive, and incapable of smart choices. But I wasn't going to stand there and let them dictate my life. I told them, firmly but clearly, that they had overstepped, that I was an adult and didn't need them making decisions for me. My mom looked hurt. My dad shook his head as if I was being ungrateful, and my siblings just sat there, quietly agreeing with our parents. I didn't wait for them to argue. I grabbed my keys and walked out. I needed space, time to think. My phone started buzzing almost immediately, first my mom, then my dad, then my sister. Some messages were apologetic, others doubled down, trying to convince me they were doing this out of love. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I ignored their messages for the first few days, calls, texts, voicemails. It didn't stop. My phone constantly lit up with missed calls from my mother, my father, and even my siblings. The group chat was a mess, filled with messages swinging between guilt-tripping and outright frustration. I wasn't ready to deal with them, not yet. Then, early on the 3rd day, someone started banging on my apartment door. It was too early for deliveries, and I hadn't invited anyone over. The knocking didn't stop. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing there, her face streaked with tears, clutching a tissue. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, calling my name, her voice breaking. She kept saying she was only trying to help, that she did everything out of love, that I was shutting out my family over a misunderstanding. I stood there listening. She wasn't leaving. When she started saying she would wait all day, I finally opened the door. She stepped inside before I could say anything, looking around my apartment as if checking to ensure I was truly okay. Then she started talking fast. She kept saying she'd done everything for my own good, that I was throwing away an incredible job, a better home, a more stable future. She wasn't just upset, she was panicked, as if she truly believed I couldn't make it without them. I told her as calmly as I could that she had gone too far, that she had no right to interfere in my life like this. Her face crumpled, and she started crying harder, saying she only wanted to fix things before I made more mistakes. I didn't argue. I just told her she needed to leave. She looked genuinely shocked, as if the idea of me refusing to back down had never crossed her mind. Not even an hour later, my father called. His voice was sharp, controlled. He didn't ask how I was, or if I was okay. He went straight to telling me that I was being selfish, that I was throwing away a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that he and my mother had sacrificed so much for me, and this was how I repaid them. He accused me of humiliating my mother, of making her cry, of breaking her heart. I didn't say much. I just listened. Then, before hanging up, he told me this was my last chance to do the right thing. After that, I called my landlord. I needed to know if my lease was actually in jeopardy. He confirmed that my parents had, in fact, tried to cancel it. They had even gone as far as trying to transfer payments to a new place, but legally, they couldn't do anything without my approval. My lease was still secure, my apartment was still mine. Then another call came in, this time from the company my parents had set up the job with. The hiring manager sounded confused. He said my father had told them I was eager to start, but they hadn't heard from me. I told them the truth. I had never applied, never agreed, and never wanted the job. There was a long pause on the other end before they awkwardly said they would update their records. My siblings started messaging me after that. First my older brother, telling me I was proving everyone right by refusing to even consider the job. Then my younger sister, saying that if I just tried it for a few months, I could at least show some appreciation for what our parents had done. None of them seemed to understand that I had never asked for any of this. The only person who wasn't pressuring me was my girlfriend. She didn't tell me what to do. She just listened, but I could tell she was upset, more than she was letting on. She admitted that my mother had tried to push her out of my life and that it hurt to know my family saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to be replaced. Things escalated again when my mother made a vague, pointed post on Facebook about ungrateful children who throw away the sacrifices their parents make. The comments were full of relatives chiming in, agreeing, offering support, asking if she was okay. Some of them messaged me privately, lecturing me, but others, like my aunt, reached out to say they supported me, that this wasn't the first time my parents had overstepped. At that point, I'd had enough. I blocked my parents on everything, calls, texts, social media. But they found new ways. My dad started emailing me from different accounts, and my mom borrowed relatives' phones to keep trying. Even after blocking them, the messages kept coming from unknown numbers. The company my parents tried to set me up with emailed me again. This time the tone was more urgent. They asked me to reconsider, saying my father had been very insistent that this job was the best fit for me. I didn't reply. Then, the final straw, my parents showed up at my workplace. I was at my desk when a coworker whispered that 2 people were asking for me at reception. I already knew who it was before I even got there. My parents stood in the lobby, my mother looking red-eyed and frantic, my father stone-faced. They said they just needed to talk, that they weren't leaving until they did. My boss saw the commotion and pulled me aside, asking if I needed security to remove them. Before I could answer, my mother's voice cracked, loud enough for the whole office to hear. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this to her. Then she broke down, sobbing in the middle of the lobby. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. My coworkers were whispering. My boss had seen enough. He told them they needed to leave. When they refused, he called security. I stood there watching as 2 security guards escorted my parents out of the building while my mother's sobs echoed down the hallway. The moment they were gone, my boss turned to me and told me to take the rest of the day off. I walked out, phone buzzing in my pocket again. More messages, more missed calls, more chaos. This wasn't over. HR called me in the next morning. My boss wasn't there this time, just the head of human resources sitting behind his desk, tapping his fingers on the armrest. He told me, in the most professional way possible, that my personal issues had no place in the office. What happened yesterday was unacceptable. My parents causing a scene in the lobby put me in an awkward position, but it also put the company in an awkward position. This was my formal warning. If anything like this happened again, there would be consequences. I assured him it wouldn't, but as soon as I left that meeting, I knew things weren't over. My parents had made it clear they weren't stopping anytime soon. Later that day, my aunt, one of the only family members on my side, called my parents directly. She told them they had gone too far, that they had embarrassed themselves, and that if they had any respect for me, they would back off. My parents didn't take it well. They told her she didn't understand, that they had only been trying to talk, and that I was the one overreacting. My mother doubled down, saying I was choosing to be difficult just to hurt them. That same evening, I got an email from my landlord. He informed me that someone had called pretending to be me and tried to cancel my lease again. At first, my parents pressured me through messages and phone calls. When I ignored them, they escalated, calling my landlord to inquire about my lease. At first, they only asked about moving dates and renewal terms, but when the landlord refused to discuss it, they tried to cancel the lease outright. Fortunately, he called me to confirm before making any changes. I told my friend about what had happened, and he was the first to bring up legal action. A restraining order wasn't something I had ever considered before, but my parents had made it clear they wouldn't accept a simple no. He urged me to look into it before things escalated even further. At the same time, my girlfriend was reaching her limit. She had been patient, supportive, and understanding, but she made it clear that she needed to know where I stood. She wanted to be with me, but she couldn't spend her life fighting off my family. She needed to see that I was willing to fight for my own independence, not just talk about it. Then my brother sent me a message, a long one. He accused me of ruining the family, of making everything about myself, of pushing away people who only wanted the best for me. He told me I was selfish, that I didn't appreciate everything our parents had done, and that I was throwing away my future out of stubbornness. There was no room for discussion in his message. It was an attack, a final attempt to guilt me into backing down. That night, my parents made one last attempt to get to me in person. They showed up outside my apartment. I was getting home from work when I saw them standing by the entrance. My mother looked like she'd been crying again, my father standing stiffly beside her. I turned around and walked in the other direction before they could say a word. I wasn't going to let them ambush me again. Later, my neighbor knocked on my door. He told me my parents had been asking people in the building about my schedule, what time I left for work, when I usually got home, whether I had visitors. He warned me that they were trying to figure out the best way to catch me off guard. That was it. That was the moment I knew I had to do more than just ignore them. The next morning, I went back to HR. I explained everything. How my parents had shown up unannounced, how they had tried to manipulate my employer, how they had been asking people in my building for information about me. HR took it seriously. They flagged my account in the system, making sure my parents couldn't contact the office again. If they tried to show up, security would be called immediately. Then I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer. I needed to know what my options were. He explained that while a restraining order was possible, there were other legal steps I could take to prevent my parents from interfering in my life, blocking them from accessing any of my financial information, making sure they couldn't impersonate me to tamper with my lease, and ensuring that any further harassment could be documented. By the time I got home, my girlfriend was waiting for me. She wasn't angry, but she was firm. She told me she loved me, but if I didn't take real steps to set boundaries, she wasn't sure if she could stay in this relationship. She needed to know that I could stand up for myself, not just react when things got bad. That night, I got one final message from my mother. She told me that if I didn't come home and make things right, they would have no choice but to remove me from the will. She said I was walking away from everything my parents had built, everything they had planned for me, and that once I was cut off, I would regret it. I blocked her. I blocked my father. I blocked my brother. Every number, every email, every social media account. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. A few days after cutting off my parents, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was thick, formal, with a lawyer's firm name printed on the front. I already knew who it was from before I even opened it. Inside, the letter was worded carefully, calm, professional, and full of concern for my well-being. My parents had apparently reached out to a lawyer, claiming they were worried about me and requesting I attend a family intervention so they could help me make better life choices. The message was clear. If I didn't comply, if I didn't accept their job, financial oversight, and agree to move closer to them, they would take necessary legal action. There were no direct threats, no outright demands, just heavily implied consequences if I refused to let them take control again. I didn't respond. That same afternoon, I got another call from the company my parents had tried to set me up with. I nearly ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. This time, the hiring manager sounded confused and slightly annoyed. They told me my father had insisted I had already formally accepted the position, even signing some paperwork on my behalf. When I explained the situation, they apologized and assured me they would not pursue it further. Still, I was left wondering why they hadn't verified with me directly sooner. My father had apparently gone as far as signing documents under my name, confirming my start date. When I told them I had never accepted the job, there was a long pause before the manager apologized and said they would have to revisit the situation internally. That was it. That was the breaking point. I contacted my lawyer immediately. Within hours, a cease and desist letter was drafted and sent directly to my parents, warning them against any further interference in my personal and professional life. My lawyer made it clear. If they kept tampering with my affairs, legal action would follow. Not long after that, the family group chat exploded. My father accused me of being irrational. My mother insisted that everything they had done was out of love. My older brother jumped in, calling me erratic and ungrateful. He told me I was making things harder than they needed to be, that I was embarrassing our parents for no reason. Then, out of nowhere, my younger sister messaged me privately. She had always stayed quiet in family conflicts, never fully siding with anyone. But now she admitted that she felt just as trapped as I had. She said she wanted to break away too, but she was scared. Our parents were already watching her more closely after everything that had happened with me, questioning where she went, who she talked to, and what she planned for the future. Meanwhile, my mother had taken to social media again, making yet another pointed Facebook post about children who reject love and family. The comments were full of distant relatives sympathizing with her, talking about how sad it must be to have a son who had lost his way. Two family members who knew the truth tried to call her out, but she ignored them. To the outside world, she was the victim. That night, when I got home from work, they were waiting outside my apartment again. They weren't knocking this time, just standing by the entrance like they were expecting me to stop and talk. I didn't. I walked straight past them and into the building without a word. My mother called out after me, saying we needed to fix this, but I kept walking. I went straight to my apartment and locked the door. Less than a minute later, I heard my phone buzzing. I ignored it. Then the building intercom rang. They were trying every way possible to reach me. I called security. They had them escorted off the property. Later that night, my sister texted me again. She said our parents had been checking her phone, her messages, asking who she was talking to. She told me she had deleted our conversation just in case. They were already worried that she would betray them too. Then another message from my father, a long one. He told me I was being stubborn, that I didn't understand the damage I was doing to the family, that if I didn't fix things, I would regret it. I didn't read the rest. I blocked his number. The cease and desist letter was officially delivered the next morning. My lawyer warned me that if my parents tried anything else, tampering with my lease again, impersonating me, interfering with my job, there would be no more warnings. The next step would be legal action. This time, the decision wasn't theirs to make, it was mine. The cease and desist letter did exactly what I expected. It sent my parents into a rage. My mother went on a full-blown campaign, calling every relative she could think of, crying that I was suing my own family. She told them I was attacking them for no reason, that they had only ever wanted to help me, and that I had turned into someone unrecognizable. The fallout started immediately. Some relatives messaged me, angry and disappointed, telling me that I had gone too far. They insisted that no matter what my parents had done, they were still my family, and I was being cruel for shutting them out so aggressively. Others, though, quietly took my side. A few messaged to check if I was okay, saying they had seen my mother's latest Facebook meltdown and knew there had to be more to the story. My aunt, the only one who had been supportive from the start, told me my parents were acting erratic, refusing to talk about what had happened unless it was to paint themselves as victims. Then my brother decided to get involved in the worst way possible. He posted a long rant on social media about ungrateful people who turned their backs on the ones who raised them. He didn't mention my name directly, but it was obvious who he was talking about. He went on about sacrifices, about family loyalty, about how some people were so stubborn that they would rather burn bridges than accept help. The comments were full of mutual friends and distant family members agreeing with him, some even reaching out to tell me to fix things before it was too late. Meanwhile, I officially closed the chapter on the job my parents tried to force me into. I contacted the company, formally declining the offer and making it clear that I had never authorized my father to accept on my behalf. I warned them that any further misrepresentation would result in legal action. The hiring manager was apologetic and assured me my file would be updated. A few days later, another letter arrived from my parents. This time, it wasn't from a lawyer, it was from them directly. The wording was cold, formal. They stated they were deeply disappointed in my choices and, as a result, were cutting me off from any future financial assistance. It was supposed to be a final punishment, one last way to remind me that they still had power over me. Except they didn't. I had been financially independent for a while now. Their cutting me off meant absolutely nothing. Then things took a turn with my younger sister. Late at night, she messaged me again. She said she had tried to leave home. She packed her bags and everything, but my parents caught her. They took her phone for hours, lectured her, and made it clear that she wasn't allowed to leave. She told me she felt trapped, but she was scared of what would happen if she pushed back too hard. I told her to wait, to stay under the radar until she was legally able to leave without them stopping her. She agreed, but something about the conversation unsettled me. Then, just like that, my parents went silent. For days after all the chaos, all the fights, all the attempts to control me, they suddenly stopped trying to reach me. No more messages, no unexpected appearances, no late-night guilt tripping. The silence was almost worse than the constant harassment. I knew it wasn't over. A few extended family members reached out, telling me that my parents had been acting strangely. They weren't talking about what happened anymore, just dismissing any questions with vague responses. It was clear they were planning something, but nobody knew what. Then my brother blocked me on everything, completely cut me off. I wasn't surprised, but it still confirmed what I already knew. He had fully sided with them. Not long after that, a letter arrived. This time, it wasn't a legal threat or an ultimatum. It was handwritten from my mother. She wrote that she regretted everything, that she missed me, that she wanted to make peace. The wording was careful, measured, like she was testing the waters to see if I would fall for it. She said she just wanted to talk, that she understood things had gone too far and that we could find a way to fix things. I didn't respond. Then my aunt called me with a warning. She told me that based on what she had heard, she suspected my parents might have hired someone, a private investigator or something similar, to check on me. They were desperate for information, trying to find out what I was doing, where I was going, and who I was talking to. That same day, I ordered security cameras for my apartment. I wasn't going to wait for them to show up again. The silence from my parents continued, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like the calm before the storm. I was locked out of my bank account. I noticed it one morning when I tried to log in and got an error message saying my password was incorrect. At first, I thought it was a simple mistake. Maybe I had typed it wrong. But after a few more failed attempts, I reset my password. That was when I saw the alert. A security warning about a failed attempt to change my login credentials from an unfamiliar device. I called the bank immediately. They confirmed that someone had tried to gain access to my account. Since my parents used to help manage my finances years ago, they still had some outdated security details, which they used to attempt fraudulent access. Fortunately, the bank flagged the activity and locked my account before they could succeed. I already knew who it was. The bank started an investigation, marking it as attempted fraud. I contacted my lawyer right after that, and within an hour, I had filed an official police report. Everything needed to be documented. If my parents thought they could still control my life, they were about to learn just how serious I was about cutting them off. Later that day, an email showed up in my inbox. It was from my mother. She admitted they had tried to access my bank account, claiming it was for my own good. Since they still had access to some of my old banking information from years ago, they had managed to answer a few security questions, but the bank flagged their activity before they could make any transfers. She claimed they were just trying to ensure I wouldn't make any irresponsible financial decisions. She didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge that what they did was illegal. That was it. My lawyer escalated the cease and desist, making it clear that if they interfered financially again, criminal charges would follow. No more warnings, no more second chances. Then my sister texted me. She told me my parents were blaming her for everything. They accused her of corrupting me, of turning me against them. They were watching her even more closely now, monitoring who she talked to and limiting her access to the internet. She told me she felt trapped. I told her to hold on. She only had a few more months before she turned 18. When the time came, I promised I would help her leave. A few hours later, my phone filled up with voicemails from my mother. She was sobbing, talking about how the stress I had caused was ruining her health. She mentioned hospital visits, doctor concerns, and how she wasn't sure how much longer she could take this. It was a guilt trip, a last-ditch attempt to make me feel responsible for what they had done to themselves. I didn't respond. Then the legal notice arrived. My parents were attempting to challenge my financial independence, claiming I was making reckless decisions and petitioning for a financial conservatorship. My lawyer assured me that such cases rarely succeed unless there is evidence of severe mental incapacity or financial mismanagement, neither of which applied to me. If this went through, they would have control over my finances, my medical choices, everything. I called my lawyer immediately. He told me to stay calm, but take it seriously. He explained that while it was difficult for parents to gain guardianship over a competent adult, it wasn't impossible. If they were willing to go this far, they would likely try to present false evidence, twist past mistakes, and make it seem like I was incapable of managing my own life. Then, out of nowhere, my brother messaged me. After weeks of ignoring me, he suddenly wanted to talk. He told me I was making a mistake, that this was getting out of control, and that I should just come home and fix this. He didn't acknowledge anything they had done, no mention of the fraud, the stalking, or the legal threats. To him, I was the one who had taken things too far. I didn't reply. Meanwhile, my mother was ramping up her public smear campaign. More cryptic Facebook posts about her lost son and how he had been brainwashed into abandoning his family. Relatives were sharing them, commenting about how tragic it was. A few even reached out to me directly, demanding to know why I was treating my parents so badly. Then the police called. They confirmed that my parents had been flagged for attempted financial fraud. The investigation was still ongoing, but it was now officially on record. If they tried anything again, it wouldn't just be a warning, it would be criminal charges. That was the final line. I contacted my lawyer to prepare for full legal no contact, not just a cease and desist, not just blocking their numbers, but a legal, permanent boundary that would ensure they could never interfere in my life again. Because now I knew the truth, they were never going to stop. The bank investigation was complete. The results weren't surprising. My parents were officially identified as the ones who attempted to access my account. They had used outdated personal details from when they still had access to my information, trying to change my login credentials and move money. The bank had flagged it as attempted fraud, and they strongly advised me to take legal action. I called my lawyer immediately. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a crime. My lawyer contacted the police with the findings, adding the fraudulent bank activity to the existing report. That same evening, I got confirmation that the police had formally questioned my parents. This was no longer something they could brush off as family drama. As expected, my mother reacted the way she always did, by making herself the victim. She called extended family members, sobbing that I was trying to send her to jail. She told them I was out of control, that I was punishing her for loving me too much. Some relatives reached out, begging me to reconsider. Others, the ones who already knew the truth, told me to stand my ground. Then my brother called. I hadn't spoken to him since he had blocked me on everything, but suddenly he was back, furious. He accused me of destroying the family, of taking things too far, of ruining our parents' lives over a misunderstanding. He didn't mention the fraud. He didn't acknowledge that they had tried to steal from me. To him, I was the problem. I blocked him permanently. Then my parents changed their story. Instead of admitting what they did, my father started telling people that I was mentally unstable. He said they had only been trying to protect me from myself. He claimed I was making reckless choices, that they were stepping in because they feared for my future. It was a new lie, but one designed to plant doubt in anyone who didn't know the full story. Then the stalking started. I noticed a car parked outside my apartment for multiple nights in a row. It wasn't always in the same spot, but it was always there. The first night, I brushed it off. The second night, I felt uneasy. By the third night, I checked my security cameras. The same car, or rather, the same vague shape of someone sitting inside, just waiting. Then my neighbor confirmed it. He pulled me aside one evening and told me that he had seen my parents lurking around the building. They had asked him questions about my schedule, about whether I was home or not. He hadn't given them any information, but he wanted me to know. That was it. I called my lawyer again. This time, he told me a restraining order might be the only way to stop them. We started preparing the paperwork immediately. Then my sister reached out again. She sent me a message late at night, saying our parents were monitoring her every move. They were making sure she wasn't talking to me, checking her phone when she wasn't looking. She said she felt like a prisoner. That was when my aunt stepped in. She told me that if my sister needed a safe place, she would take her in without hesitation. She had already started making arrangements, just in case. Meanwhile, my girlfriend was growing more concerned. She suggested that we stay somewhere else for a while, just to be safe. I agreed. The way things were escalating, I didn't trust that my parents wouldn't try something even more drastic. Then my lawyer sent the final legal warning. A formal notice was issued to my parents, making it clear, if they continued, I would file for a restraining order. This was their last chance to stop before things became permanent. And then silence. No calls, no messages, no social media rants. For the first time in months, they disappeared. But I knew this wasn't over. My lawyer advised that a restraining order required strong evidence, so we began compiling records, police reports, messages, attempts at fraud, and witness statements. It took time, but eventually, the court agreed there was enough proof to issue a temporary order. If my parents violated it, legal consequences would follow. The court date was set, and I was ready. That night, my mother had a meltdown in the family group chat. She sent message after message claiming I was disowning my own family, that I had been manipulated into hating them. She insisted that all they had ever done was try to help me, and now I was treating them like criminals. She begged other relatives to talk some sense into me. A few jumped in, telling me I was being cruel, others stayed silent. Then the social media posts started. My parents flooded their pages with cryptic messages about losing a child to lies and the pain of betrayal. It was clear they wanted people to think I had abandoned them for no reason. Some relatives cut me off entirely after seeing those posts. Others, the ones who knew the truth, reached out quietly to offer support. At the court hearing, my parents fought back. They played innocent, claiming they had never meant any harm. They said they were just concerned parents who made mistakes out of love. My father insisted they had only tried to access my bank account to keep me safe. My mother cried, saying she couldn't understand why I was doing this to them. The judge was not impressed. The ruling was swift. A temporary restraining order was granted. My parents were warned that any further harassment would result in criminal charges. They were legally barred from contacting me, coming near my home, my workplace, or interfering with any aspect of my life. Then the best news of all, my sister escaped. With help from our aunt, she packed her things and walked out of my parents' house for good. My parents tried to stop her, but she was legally an adult now. They had no power over her anymore. She was safe. My parents tried one last move. Handwritten letters started arriving at my apartment. The first few were apologetic, asking me to talk. When I didn't respond, the tone changed. They became more desperate, more accusing. I didn't open any more after that. Then the financial fallout hit them. The bank officially banned my parents from any future access to my accounts. Their names were flagged, preventing them from attempting anything similar again. Whatever last bit of control they thought they had over me was gone. Slowly, their social standing began to decline. Relatives started distancing themselves. The more people learned the full story, the less sympathy my parents received. They weren't the victims they had tried to portray themselves as. They had pushed too far, and now they were losing the support they once relied on. Then the final social media rant. My mother posted one last desperate message claiming I had been brainwashed and that I would regret this someday. I didn't bother reading the rest. With legal protection in place, my accounts secured, and my sister finally free, it was over. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. I changed my number, every email, every account, every possible way my parents could use to contact me, gone. I set up new security measures on all my financial and personal information. My lawyer made sure all legal paperwork was finalized. I realized there was no way back. This was full no contact. My parents didn't take it well. With no direct way to reach me, they started working through mutual friends and distant relatives. They painted themselves as heartbroken parents devastated by their lost son. A few relatives, the ones who still believed their lies, messaged me through new numbers, trying to get me to reconsider. I ignored them. The rest had already seen the truth unfold and had begun distancing themselves from my parents. Then I heard about my brother. A friend from back home mentioned that my older brother was struggling financially. My parents had drained his savings to cover their legal fees. They had used him just like they had tried to use me. Unlike me, he had let them. He had stood by them, defended them, and now they had left him with nothing. I didn't reach out. That was his decision to live with. The cracks in my parents' reputation continued to spread. The more people learned the truth, the more they pulled away. The constant lies, the manipulation, the legal threats, it had all caught up with them. Then my mother tried one last trick. News spread that she was in the hospital. A message came through a mutual acquaintance saying she was in critical condition and begging for me to visit. My parents were desperate. This was their last attempt to manipulate me. I didn't believe it for a second. I called a relative who lived nearby and asked if it was true. They checked and confirmed. My mother was fine. She wasn't in critical condition. It was just another lie, another desperate attempt to regain control. I ignored it. Meanwhile, my sister was building a new life. Living with our aunt, she found a job, started making her own money, and for the first time in her life, had independence. She was free from them, just like I was. That was when my parents turned their attention to her. With no way to guilt-trip me, they tried to bring her back. They sent messages pleading with her to come home, saying they forgave her. When she didn't respond, they switched to guilt, telling her she had betrayed her family. She refused to fall for it. She had seen everything they had done to me, and she was never going back. My lawyer finalized the last steps of my legal case. My parents were permanently cut off. No interference, no loopholes, nothing. Then, out of nowhere, an old childhood friend messaged me. He said my parents had reached out to him, asking about me, wanting to know where I was living. They were still trying, still refusing to accept that I was gone for good. A few days later, one last message came through a mutual acquaintance. It was from my mother. She claimed she forgave me. She hoped I would come back one day, that no matter what happened, I would always be her son. It was laughable. The same person who had tried to steal from me, stalk me, take legal action against me was now playing the forgiving mother. I never responded. Then my girlfriend and I packed our things and moved to a new city, a fresh start, far away from any chance of my parents finding us. With both their children gone, my parents lost everything. Their power, their control, their influence. It all faded. Nobody believed them anymore. They had pushed too far, and now they had nothing left. My sister visited me for the first time in my new home. We sat together, finally free, and toasted to the life we had built on our own terms. It was over for good.